those statistics make for some grim reading, and I really hope that we can, in a short amount of time that we have, start to look at some of the issues that perhaps we can address to ensure that we're not sitting here in 12 months' time with our 4th annual index saying the balance has got worse, this has happened, that's happened. We've had a very difficult time through COVID, but what it has enabled, as those statistics show, that flexible working has become a part of what we do as professionals, and in our industry it has worked very well. However, there have been such huge issues with parental control and how that works that we need to address some of those issues. What we aim to do today is to look at some questions and perhaps try and seek some solutions as to what we might be doing going forward. First of all, the panel that we have represents quite a cross-section. We have Melissa, who's in India. We have Heather, whom you've seen yesterday, from the States. We have Anna, who runs our group in the UK. And now Moliehi, I'm not sure I'm pronouncing your name correctly, so forgive me, who's Managing Director of Magna Carta Agency in South Africa. I think what I'd like to start with is the issue of parenting and how that clearly has an impact on the number of women taking on senior leadership roles. When we look at maternity leave and paternity leave, there's a huge difference in the balance of men actually taking a lead role in raising a family. So I wondered if that's an issue that you feel that should be addressed in a much more forcible way so that we start to create a better environment, because without that better environment, we're still going to have women doing, as Angela said, the double shifts in terms of taking care of the family. Perhaps, Heather, if I could start with you in terms of your view on how this works. I know in America it's similar to here, that paternity leave is a tick box, but very few men actually take the time to take that time off because they fear for their careers.
They do, and when I had my first child, I was in Canada. Very different policy in Canada. There's a year that either parent can take in terms of leave. And I loved my job so much. When I had my daughter, I said to my husband, I feel like I'm trapped, let me back to work, we've got to change it up. So I did the first 3 months at home, and then my husband did 9 months at home with our daughter. And those kinds of social programs do allow for a more equitable split, at least a conversation to happen. And corporations really have not kept up. Some of them have very light policies, but they're not putting in place the procedures needed, and even talking about it, promoting parental leave, equal parental leave policies. I think that's part of it, to have the discussion going. And from there, my husband had such a good experience. He stayed home with our children, and my daughter's 17. So it's been my entire career, I've had my husband at home, and in many ways that's been able to allow me to accelerate my career journey. Companies do it as a tick box, but again, I think it comes back to the promotion, celebration, and leadership taking it. Because if you see someone taking it, then you feel like it's okay for me too. Yeah, in the US, we don't see that as much.
No, sadly not here either. Anna, talking about UK, your experience in that respect, also as a mother and having to juggle everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think it is a shame that I don't think that men feel that they can take the time off in the same way. I love that example about Canada. It's so forward thinking. I'd love to see something like that over here because, I mean, I was quite similar. I think I lost a lot of my identity when I was on maternity leave, and I just wanted to get back to work, but everyone convinced me that I needed to stay at home for a year and enjoy the year of maternity leave. And I don't think, we're not all programmed the same. We're all very different people. So I think you need to have a system that flexes with the people that are, building these families. Ultimately, that's the reason I started my business, is because I didn't feel like I could have both in an agency world. I was working on a very corporate and financial side, and I just didn't see a way forward for me to have 2 small children and my career. So I built a world that I could control.
That's so true. There are so many women who get to having a family and they realize that the culture is not commensurate with what they want to do. They are professionally challenged in that respect. So they leave. They either choose to do something else, or they set up, or they go freelance, which is not a great move for the businesses who require senior women to stay in our industry and take on those leadership roles. And if we are discouraging that, then we are not enabling businesses to succeed in the way that they should. Melissa, from your viewpoint, how important has parental leave and that issue been in career development in India for women?
I think it's relatively new as far as India goes. But having said that, I do believe that we've got to kind of deepen the pool at the table, celebrate men who do take paternity leave, and encourage them to do so, because I do sense a certain amount of hesitancy and fear and wanting to avail of that leave. And honestly, if you look, and I've tracked some of these pictures in the last year or so of men who've been working from home, and most of their photographs around, caring responsibilities are having fun with the children. Whereas if you look at the kind of photographs women post, it's all about, tutoring them and cooking at home and taking care, bathing them and stuff like that. So I think we've got to have conversations that go beyond just taking that parental leave or the paternity leave, but what you do with that leave. How do you support and contribute to caring responsibilities at home? And we've got to celebrate some of the men who do that.
True. Moliehi, in South Africa, how has that manifested itself in terms of the balance and women moving away from the industry rather than staying when they have a family?
Speaking from experience, I worked in a woman-led business, but when I had my children, we actually did not have maternity pay. So that basically you go and have a baby, but you have the anxiety of an income. What is going to happen? Because in that 4 months, in South Africa and in certain companies, the maternity leave is for 4 months. You don't have any income coming through. So already you are going with an anxiety of, first of all, I'm going to be replaced because there's a standing somebody who's going to take over my work. Secondly, I'm not actually bonding with this child because I've got this worry about my work. What are they going to eat? And also the cultural, impact on my work, and as a woman, is to look after the child, is to look after the home. And there isn't, in many households, in many families, there is no support, from the male partner. So you find that you're dealing with a lot of challenges, and at the same time, you're not able to give the love that you're supposed to this newborn child. So I think in an effort to try and to really to build a healthy society, these are some of the cultural biases that we need to work on. These are the kind of, we need to bring the education back in terms of how do we support women during this critical time of their life, because it's supposed to be a loving time. It's supposed to be a time where you're enjoying yourself. As a woman, you are bringing new life into the world. So the support structure from the work environment to the home is really critical. And I think the more we do and the more we speak about these things, and women become open about the emotional trauma that they go through when they are going through this time, will really help the future generation.
Yes, I think leading by example, and I know in Sweden, for example, that they have to persuade more women to take leave when they're having a family. They have no problem at all in fathers being delighted to take the time out. And also there's lots of commitment to that being part of the workplace, and it's become an inherent part of the culture. So it can happen and it can work. We just need to ensure that it happens on a much bigger scale and that it's taken seriously. I think it's something that's very clearly there to say, yes, we offer it, but there needs to clearly to be a lot more done to ensure that it's part of the practice and that it's essential that we get a better balance in that respect. Otherwise, we're just not going to get a better balance in the boardroom. Another question I want to look at is what steps we think, aside clearly apart from getting a better balance in terms of parental leave and the culture of accepting that both parents have an equal role to play, is do we need to put in place flexible working arrangements that that allows us to not have a 24/7 work culture that, as Angela said just now, leads to burnout and stress. Again, two things that are clearly affecting women in the workplace. What steps can organizations take to ensure that this isn't perpetuated post-pandemic, and also particularly now that most assume that they're going to be working from home at least 2 days, if not 3 days a week? What impact, what things can we do in organizations to stop that getting worse and indeed reverse the trend? Heather, can I start with you?
Sure. Oh, I have so much to say. With the talent crunch that's happening right now in every country around the world that has communications as an industry, this is going to be the pressure that organizations need, honestly. You know, I in the US, I'm the chair of the PR Council, and we have hundreds of agencies that we talk to every single month as part of that. And I do see there's a body of agency leaders who say, I just can't wait to get back to the way it used to be. You know, I'm desperate for that. I know how to work in that environment. Everyone's coming back. That's the way it's going to be. And the talent in the industry is telling us, absolutely not. That's not the way it's going to be. So we have to think as innovation leaders, both from a leadership point of view, but also from an individual point of view. And I want to talk about the responsibility of both, because leaders do need to think flexible doesn't mean not here. Flexible doesn't mean that we won't have a culture. Flexible is a new thing we're creating together. So we have an opportunity as leaders to create something new. And I have to be open to exploring other ways of working that I wasn't in the past. And I think talent needs to come forward and say, this is what I'm thinking. Will this work for us? How do we co-create some different solutions? So things that I see really working are people in my business saying, I've got to take down to part-time because I want to go take a training. Then I want to come back full-time and bring those skills to the business. Okay, how do we make that happen? That sounds great. Or I need to be off for every Friday because my children are doing this or that. Okay, I don't want to lose you. Why wouldn't I have that conversation? And so that's what innovation leaders will do. They will start to listen in a different way, but I also think people need to share what will work for them, because I'm not a mind reader, and so I don't know what's going on for individuals. And unless you create, though, a space where it's safe to talk about those kinds of topics, people won't bring it forward. So that's what I think, you really have to be open to that innovation solution thinking.
I agree, and interestingly, what I think COVID has brought us is the opportunity to take a blank sheet of paper and start again in many, many ways, because the experience has been so dramatic, the opportunities for working have changed so dramatically that if we don't seize this opportunity, we're very foolish. As leaders, we have to look at what we can do now to move the dial, to actually listen to what our teams require, to put in place measures that will help them achieve that, and listening and reshaping. It's just such a golden opportunity to do something really positive. Anna, you've taken the step and started your own business, but you know.
No, and it's just such a huge topic, I think, because we're all still finding our way in the dark, because it is such new territory. And I think the problem with the kind of enforced home working, I don't really think it's flexible working. What we've just been through is enforced home working rather than being flexible. But I think that whole period allowed us to blur those boundaries between home and work. And you've seen the burnout statistics in the survey, and it's been very commonly referred to across the industry that there needs to be the boundaries put in place. And you know, you've seen countries like Portugal recently have put in a ban that you can't email after certain hours, or they're talking about it and things like this. And I've had lots of conversations with a whole range of people about how you can put these boundaries in place. And I think they have to be flexible boundaries, because at the end of the day, you know, I'm a working parent. I have to basically clock off at around 6:30. do the whole bed thing, and then I'll clock back on at about 8 o'clock. Loads of people go off for classes, they're going to the gym, whatever it is, and then they'll clock back in. So if you say you cannot email your team after like 7 o'clock, then it's like, well, hang on a minute, I needed to do this stuff. And so that's inflexible in this new flexible world. So I think there needs to be a dialogue, there needs to be a conversation. You need to be able to set those expectations. And yes, I can send an email to my team at 9, but maybe in the email I'll just say, please do not action until your working day begins. It's very simple. You just need to have that honest conversation with people. And I think when we start kind of talking to each other and figuring it out together, as you say, leaders need to have that open dialogue, then I think we'll work a way through it together as well.
Yes, I think conversations are clearly key to this, and it's hearing from your team, many of whom have worked in tiny spaces, in a bubble, where it's very difficult. They don't want to be at home. They absolutely relish the water cooler moment. They absolutely relish being in an office away from all the constraints of perhaps having to share an internet single with 3 other people in a crowded flat share. So we can't assume that everybody is keen to want to be at home. They don't. Many are delighted to have a workspace and colleagues. However, it's about the balance and about this 24/7 and what steps we need to take to address both sides of the coin. Melissa, from your perspective, in terms of putting in place steps to address flexibility and in-office working to make sure that we don't lose a drive for change.
Yes, Sue, and it was all kind of mentioned and discussed earlier. We can talk about setting mutual expectations and group norms, providing the right kind of technology and tools, and leaders and managers leading by examples, sharing best practices, training on work-life boundary management, regular check-ins, and all of these, which we probably need to institutionalize. But I want to address a more fundamental issue, which has also been alluded to earlier, which I don't really honestly believe it's really all about flexible work. Many of us worked in a flexi work environment before the pandemic, and we cannot do a lift and shift. What I see happening is a lot of the same policies and processes and everything is just being brought into the pandemic environment. But we've got to go beyond. And as you said earlier, we've got employees who are working at home suddenly in an environment where they have children studying, where they have in-laws vying for their attention, where they don't have enough of space. How do we create enabling policies for a home-based environment? And I think once we look at it as home-based as opposed to flexible work, a lot of things will change. I mean, how do we set up employees for success, whether it is offering them co-working spaces in the neighborhood that they could go out, for an hour or two or a few hours every week, or how do we introduce more childcare policies, to take care of the children that are at home? And I think that's what we really, really need to look at, more than just, flexi work policies. It's enabling policies for a home environment situation.
Yes, I think that's true, because, as I've said, there are many who struggle, and setting up regional, localized workspaces, the flexibility that started previously with companies taking flexible working spaces to actually make that more local and to provide a couple of hours respite and easy access is something I think that's being trialed. So maybe that's an initiative that will grow and support those who want to be closer to home and need to be at home to do more and have that interaction as well. Moliehi, your view on how this might work in terms of across the African continent and how that has been perceived?
Yeah, so I think the issue of flexibility is quite important. Across the continent, COVID has forced us to really operate in a way that we never have done before, and has actually challenged a lot of our clients where they've, physical meetings were the order of the day. So with what happened globally, we now had to adapt to new ways of engaging. And as much as we are seeing, a lot of companies putting measures in place to adapt this flexible work and to protect the employees, I think what we are failing to do in the PR industry is also to protect our talent against our clients. being able to share our policies with our clients so that there is not this expectation of just because you are working remotely, you might not be actually completely working according to the agreed hours. We are not seeing value out of you. So it's quite important that there is total communication across board, and we are able to have an understanding and that protects our talent. Because you find that the abuse at times does not come from the agency itself, it comes from clients. And us as leaders, if we could be able to actually provide that buffer and be able to really engage with clients in terms of how to help take care of our talent so we can be able to deliver the best work, especially on our female staff, is going to be something that we need to really take seriously because the workload has increased, not just from a business point of view. Household responsibilities have increased on them. Most of them have now had to also be, teachers for their children at home. So there's a lot that is relying on them, and to be able to really get the support from the employers is very important. So those boundaries that our earlier colleagues was talking about are very important, that they need to be set up, and we need to honor them as well.
Indeed, it's very important. One issue that's often mentioned and sort of gets knocked back again, and looking at those statistics that Angela read out, maybe it's time we need to look at it again. Should organizations have a quota for the number of women in the boardroom? I mean, this is really becomes quite a divisive issue, and there are strong views on either side. I ask it because for 3 years we've been still saying that the boardroom is 64, 36. It wavers, but and yet our industry is populated by women who are very good at it. But should we, to really focus the mind, should we have a quota? Is a quota system one way of helping to address this issue in perhaps a more dictatorial way? I don't know. I don't have the answer, but I don't know how you view.
I hadn't even thought about that before, a quota system. I'm not sure. I mean, I was trying to think back to the time when I realized I could be a CEO, because growing up I was in communications, and then when I got into a global tech company and I saw that it was the chief marketing officer, not the chief communications officer, who was in with the CEO. And to me that was a signal like, oh, marketing there's a hierarchy here, right? So I said, okay, I don't know how to be a CMO, but I should do that because I want to be with the CEO making decisions. So I needed to go back to school, and I did my master's. And I started it when I had my daughter, who was, I think, 4 at the time, and then went back to school weekends and got pregnant while I was doing my master's and had my son during that period of time. And it took me a long time to get my master's, about 6 years, going on the weekends. And as I was finishing up my master's, I had a professor, finance professor, talking about something and said, okay, when you're the CEO of a company, here are the things you want to look at. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, why are you here if you're not trying to be a CEO? And I said, I could be a CEO? And he goes, Heather, yes, that's why you're here training. It had never crossed my mind that that was something that I could aspire to. And so I think there needs to be a discussion, like an active discussion with women early in their career about the options that are available. I consider it my personal responsibility to have that conversation with women in my business, women outside my business, to say, let's look at all of the career options for you and what the pros and cons are of each and what you might have to do to get there. And you need someone in your life to sort of smack you in the face sometimes and open up your eyes to something. So I don't think as much as quotas, but I think about the leaders in our industry who have moved into these positions, taking time and personal care. And then also, I feel like I have a responsibility to speak at events, to be interviewed. I'm writing a book, not because I love the process of writing a book, but I think we need to show other women coming up, you can do this. Here's how you do it. Let's do it together. I'll show you how. So I can't answer the quota question, but that's how I think about how do we grow women leaders up. And there's also a lot of research that women leaders or women earlier in their career maybe won't take the opportunity, they won't apply for a job if they're not more than qualified. And I think it's also our responsibilities to go to those women and say, might not feel ready, but it is time for you to try this. And to help them have the confidence to step into something new.
I do think that's very important, and it's about encouraging the next generation. And part of what we're doing with the mentoring scheme is to actually encourage women who are looking at taking on more senior leadership roles and giving them the skills that they need. As in Singapore, they're putting together a series of career pathway opportunities for women to tap into. And I think by nature, I don't know why, but women are far, if you ask a man, could he go for getting this job, and he may not have all the requirements, the answer is very simply, yes, he can, and yes, he will. You ask a woman and say, well, actually, I think I probably need to do X, Y, and Z, and then I might be ready. There is a difference, and it's a difference of approach, and we need to encourage women to believe that actually, yes, of course they can do it. They've been successful in careers, women running businesses, and a lot more women are doing so, but it's how we make that happen, and does a quota system work or not? Anna?
Well, I can attempt to answer the quota system question. I mean, I think that even the term quota is a pretty unattractive word. And I think it is a necessary evil, but I don't think that it's actually very productive in many cases, and can actually be unproductive in the advancement of certain areas. And I think this is one of those areas. So if you look at where we've come from, so the FTSE 250 and the FTSE 100 now have a third of women on their boards. The FTSE 100 did that a year ahead of schedule, I think it was, yes. And the FTSE 250 did it bang on. So, we have come a long way. There's obviously a lot more room to go, and we need that evolution, but it does need to be an evolution. I believe that this kind of big fundamental social change within our corporate structures needs to happen over a period of time. It won't respond well to shock treatments. The markets never do. So, it has to happen over a gradual time. And I think one of the fundamental issues that we've got at the moment is that, and it's one of communication. We are not communicating to the CEOs and the C-suites of these businesses the benefits that a diverse board will bring to their business. And there are just countless ways of demonstrating this, whether you're looking at the profit, the turnover, the Glassdoor reviews, customer satisfaction, NPS scores, or internal employee engagement and satisfaction. You can pick up all of these metrics, and you can look at what makes a company great, and what does their board look like, and how is that board impacting how great that company is. And I guarantee you, the ones with diverse boards will have really high scores, because it's a no-brainer. Of course, having a diverse board and having lots of great minds around that table will impact a business positively. But the people that sit at that table deserve a place at that table, and they should get that by merit, not by quota.
I agree on merit is absolutely key, and it's encouraging companies to understand, as you say, all the research indicates that businesses that have a diverse board and a balanced board are more profitable. So it's not about it's not fair. That's not the argument. The argument is that if we want to run successful businesses, we need to have a balance, and that's absolutely critical. Melissa.
Yeah, I completely agree that it should be based on merit, and I'm not one for quotas, but in a situation that we're seeing, and increasingly so, where women are hopelessly underrepresented, I think it might be good to look at a quota, even if that means having at least a few women. However, having said that, I can tell you experience in India where all listed companies have to have one woman on board has shown that it's mere tokenism, that, invariably a family member is inducted, or a woman, irrespective of her experience and ability to serve on the board, is brought on. So it's a very difficult challenge I think we're faced with. But I think it's equally important, as Heather said, to create those career paths and board positions for women as an aspiration. We don't see that happening. And, having done programs over here with another organization that I'm a member of, and even within my own organization, where I've invited women on boards to talk to our women about what career paths to boards look like, I think it's been fascinating, those discussions, and it helps women kind of, prepare themselves for those kind of career paths, which we don't do too much of. So I definitely think we need to do a lot more on, defining these board positions for women and what that looks like and what is required really to attain a board position.
Yes. Moliehi.
I think from my perspective, besides just pushing a quota, it's important to actually have the desire and willingness for diversity. If a business does not see the value that a diverse, workforce brings, or a diverse board brings, then you literally are pushing women into a very hostile environment where things will be done just to undermine them, that their voices will not be heard, that they will have to go against a lot of challenges where you'd have meetings that are set up at ungodly hours, knowing that as women, you will not be able to participate because of other commitments that you have. But if an organization or a business realizes the value that women brings, and that you can actually be a competitive force out there, then it's a different way of looking at it. Because if anything is forced, then you're going to actually meet up with a lot of challenges, and that would not be fair on the women that have been put forward. Because also we need to look at what kind of support have those women been given. Do they have people that they can actually look up to? Are they mentors that actually they can engage and speak to, who can help navigate them through this journey? Because also just sitting on a board for the sake of numbers does not actually add any value. You need to make sure that you are sitting there because you are bringing, something to the table, and that your board members, your fellow board members, are actually going to listen to you. They were going to, appreciate the input that you are bringing. So we also need to be careful of just, doing quotas for the sake of quotas, but it has to actually to serve a purpose. What is the purpose of us pushing for that?
Thank you.
Can I just add to bringing it back to the parent conversation earlier and having families? It's a question that I don't get asked often about, but a few people have. They said, I don't think I want to do that job because I think I wouldn't be able to manage my life. And so I could never aspire to a CEO position because I think there's an assumption about what that looks like in terms of work and travel and all of it. And so I think as women in leadership positions, CEO positions, I know I could do more to talk about that. This is what my life actually looks like. This is how I think about my health. This is how I think about spending time with my family. Here are the trade-offs if you want this big job. But also, here's what's great about it. Because sometimes I think there's an assumption that there's an accumulation of responsibilities as you get to the top. But in fact, it's a very different job than when you are running a practice and running a CEO position. And so we need to talk about the scope of the job, how it fits with life, and how it can be so fulfilling and it can fit in with your entire life.
I think demonstrating that you can have a family, that you can run an organization, and I think it's incumbent on CEOs to actually demonstrate that, to show that they go to a parents' evening, to get up and leave at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, so that the rest of the team can see that they're doing it, so it's okay for them to do it. To look at practically demonstrating the differences that can be made, and that you can, if you like, have it all. You can balance family life and be successful. And I agree with you, if you force something, people rail against it, and the women who've gone before are not going to be viewed in quite the same way, which is not what we want to achieve. I think, if anything, that COVID has taught us to have a bigger dialogue, to actually examine things that we really had put on the back burner, and that we've been forced to look at flexible working, forced working, if you like. Flexibility doesn't equate to having a tiny space in a crowded flat share. It doesn't. Flexibility is about being able to agree hours. If you're able to work from midday until midnight, and that can be a good thing for the business in our 24-hour news society, then that should be encouraged too. So I think it's, as we've all said, about dialogue, about leading by example, about encouragement and mentoring, and for leaders to demonstrate that it's okay to have a family and be successful. And yes, you take the time out to do it, but you demonstrate that that's what you're doing. I think we are running out of time. So can I ask each of you for one thing you'd like to offer or to take on board to do in the next 12 months to help towards changing the dial, so that perhaps we don't end up saying that it's 60-40 and we still have the same issues. What thing would you like to see happen, or what would you like to do to make things change?
I just thought of one, because as I said earlier, I feel it's a personal responsibility for me to talk about how do you take the top spot, but I'm going to do more to reach out to other industry CEOs and challenge them to have those conversations as well, especially the men CEOs, to talk about talent development in their business. I haven't done that.
Hannah.
I think it's really important to demonstrate that you can sit on a board. You know, I'm a board member. I'm a board member of a charity based in London. I know a lot of people in my industry are board members as well. You don't have to be, you know, a certain age. You don't have to be a certain gender. You can do it whenever you like. And a lot of charities are calling out for communication professionals to sit on their boards because they often have a communication issue. So we're going to be setting out a whole load of events early next year, working with different organisations such as Women on Boards, and we want to work with the 30% Club to try and encourage our members at Women in PR to get on boards, because I think it's a hugely fulfilling experience, and especially as someone that runs a business as well, it's great to see the inner workings of another business and how it all kind of knits together. And I think it can only do positive things for your career.
Absolutely. Melissa, one thing you'd like to introduce in the next 12 months?
It's something that I've already started working on through GWPR India, which is really to bring the HR fraternity across agencies together to have discussions on how we can really progress women in the industry. I think they need to be part of the solution.
And Mohi, your final thoughts on what we can do in the next 12 months?
I think the most important thing for me is to really expose my fellow, ladies at work, especially, to the various levels of leadership. Sometimes we take it upon ourselves to say, you are a CEO, that's your role, you must do a whole lot of things by yourself, instead of just exposure and getting people in to look in what it takes to run a business, what it takes to be able to be sitting in those meetings where you are discussing deals and you are bringing new business. So just exposure, because sometimes people don't aspire to your position because they don't know what it takes, or they are afraid of what it will mean for them. So that is a way of mentoring without necessarily making it a formal kind of a commitment and structure, but just letting other people see more of what happens when women lead businesses, and just lift as you rise, make sure that others are able to come in and they can come and be able to do a better job than yourself.
Thank you. And I think it's been very illuminating. Thank you all very much for taking part in this discussion. And I hope that this time next year, some changes will have happened, but at least we'll be on the path to making a difference, and making a difference for all of us and for business. Thank you.